Welcome to the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services podcast. I'm Gail Lucas, your host. I'm also the Division Chief for the Customer Support and Outreach Division here at DPS. Joining us on the podcast today is a new face to our podcast, Michael Marcassani, who works in our Fire Code Compliance Unit. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Gail.
Why don't you explain to our listeners and to our viewers what your unit does and what your job is?
As you said, I work in Fire Code Compliance. I'm a program manager there. I've been a manager for about 5 years and actually in the department for about a little over 11.
Okay.
Fire Code Compliance is responsible for all existing buildings in Montgomery County, Maryland. We are responsible for all the fire code compliance permits, and every occupancy and tenancy in Montgomery County is required to have a fire code compliance permit. What does that mean? Well, it just means that we go out and look at existing buildings to make sure they're safe for the general public when they go in. So you walk into a restaurant and it has a fire alarm and a sprinkler system
Right.
and an extinguishment system for its cooking devices. We go in and make sure that those, as well as the fire extinguishers and the emergency lights and exit lights, those type things, are all up to date and current.
Okay. It is getting colder outside. It's getting cooler outside. It's fall. It's my favorite time of year. And one of the reasons it's my favorite time of year is because I get to use my fire pit now. I get to use my fire pit again. So we're going to talk today about fire pits and residential fire pit safety.
Okay. So you don't like using them in the summertime when it's 100 degrees outside?
Not usually, but maybe sometimes for s'mores.
Okay.
All right. So talk a little bit about how we can use these fire pits that we're all going out and buying now safely at home.
So let's start with the basics. The basics are, we want you to have, if you own the land, that's great.
Okay.
If you don't, you got to follow all the rules that are associated with where you're living.
Okay.
So if I live in an apartment building, the apartment building may have rules,
Right.
even doing it close to the building.
Right.
If I'm in my home, my single family home, and I have a backyard, I have a real nice stone patio or something like that, and I've had a contractor build a fire pit, that's great. So maybe you've been to one of the Home Depot or Lowe's or one of those and bought one of those over the counter, if you will, fire pits. Those are nice, typically made of non-combustible materials, again, like metal or steel. And we just ask people to use them as they were designed. So you want to look and read the instructions if it's something that you buy. If it's something that you have at your home and you've had a contractor or you've built one, then you want to make sure that they're smaller than 3 feet around. You want to make sure that you keep like children away at least 3 feet.
Okay.
Anytime it's burning, you need an adult around
to
make sure that the fire does what it's supposed to and stays in that. We always tell you to burn clean, dry wood.
Okay. What's clean, dry wood?
Clean, dry wood is just seasoned firewood. Maybe it's firewood you've bought at the grocery store in one of those bundles that's designed for those type things. Or if you do get wood from a vendor, just make sure it's not green and just freshly cut. It's something that's been down for a while and dry.
Now, I have an HOA in my neighborhood. Are there rules around HOA? Do HOAs have rules around fire pits? Maybe let me ask it that way.
Some do, some don't.
Okay.
We always tell people to reach out to their homeowners association, those folks, and make sure that it is okay. You always want to burn on like non-code red days, and you want to burn when it's not windy out, because you want to try to make sure your smoke and heat go directly up into the air and into the sky rather than floating along in the wind to maybe a neighbor's house that's that's allergic and causing a problem that way.
Sure. Is there, and I shouldn't say is there a preference, but is there different advice that you all give if I have a wood burning fire pit versus a gas burning fire pit?
No, we want you to just be safe.
Okay.
If it is a residence, we want you to make sure that it's 10 feet away from like your
Okay.
home,
Okay.
all the combustible materials, sheds, mulch, piles. So a lot of people will get complaints every now and then that they're burning next to their mulch pile in their backyard.
Okay.
Not really smart
Right.
because the mulch pile is typically wood. So we don't want that to burn.
Right.
Want the fire to stay where it's at.
Do you have any advice about how I pick out a fire pit? What should I be looking for when I'm at the big box store, or if I have a contractor come in and do it? What do I want to make sure that I have in my fire pit or have around it?
So if it is something that you're buying, make sure that you look at the instructions and it meets your needs, that you
Okay.
can use it where you're intending to use
Okay.
it. If it's something that you did buy, follow the instructions. Just read the instructions and see how the manufacturer intended it to be used. They'll typically give you guidance. And some of those things, they can vary in size.
Okay.
So it may
Right.
tell you the distance is more than 10 feet,
Okay.
where we recommend a minimum of 10 feet. It
Right.
might recommend 15 or 20. It'll recommend, obviously, the other safety factors there of keeping like small children and people back.
Right.
When you have a fire pit on the ground, one of those other things is you don't want any trip hazards close to it
Oh, sure.
because you don't want
Sure.
somebody to trip and fall into the
Right.
fire.
Right.
So we always like to keep our furry friends
Right.
in mind. So we want you to keep pets back from them because they're curious of what the fire is as well. But back to your question on if you have it constructed. Well, we want you to hire a contractor that's licensed in the county
Okay.
and that'll follow the rules to build it. Some of those can be like pre-piped with gas. Some of it's just hardscape where they build it on the ground, where
Okay.
they'll put
Right.
a nice stone or concrete surface on the ground. And it'll be like even like a real nice patio where you can put your furniture and stuff
Right.
around it. Or maybe they'll even build walls and benches. I've seen some really elaborate
Right.
things over the years that are really nice. But the big key is that you kind of want to sit back at least 3 foot from the fire,
Okay.
keep people away 3 foot. Basic, keep the 10-foot rule all the way around. Just follow those manufacturer's instructions if it's something that you buy.
For a typical fire pit, do I need a permit? Even if I have one constructed or I buy one over the counter, as it were, do I need a permit for my backyard fire pit?
So on the resident side, no. But if it
Okay.
is something in the commercial side, yes, you do need a permit.
Okay. Let's talk about what I do with the material that I burn. When I finish my fire or finish my socializing for that evening, what do I do with the debris that's left in my fire pit? The ashes, maybe partially burned wood. Can I leave it in the fire pit or do I need to remove it?
So we kind of really want you to leave it in the fire pit for
Okay.
about 24 hours.
Okay.
Big key is once you're done socializing, your event's over, you really want to make sure as best that you can that you believe that the fire's totally out.
Okay.
Remember that those embers continue to burn on the unburned wood, and you've got embers within the ashes, and
Okay.
a lot of that heat's still there.
Yes.
So you maybe you have a metal shovel or something like that. Keep your water handy for safety.
Okay.
Sometimes even a hose if you have a bigger fire pit. Keep that handy. That's both for emergencies and to extinguish it to make sure it's out when you're done. So you can keep the stuff in the fire pit, but let's say it's building up and you want to clean that out.
Right.
We tell you to clean it out with a metal shovel,
Okay.
store it in a metal bucket.
Okay.
If you're in that process and you see that there are still some heat and some embers burning, stop.
Okay.
Make sure that the
Okay.
fire is totally out.
Okay.
Then continue back to what you're doing. You can store that in a metal bucket, obviously with a metal lid as well. You want to keep the air away from it.
You talked a little bit about having a hose or having water. Is that recommended when I use my fire pit that I have water ready?
It is. We want you to be as safe as possible. You never know. Even with seasoned dry wood,
Okay.
you could get some bark and some popping. That
Okay.
popping sound that you're probably
Right.
used to in the
Right.
fall, kind of that ambiance to your evening.
Yes, gotta
Uh,
have it pop.
So those pops and stuff, could produce embers that come outside, and you don't want those embers to catch anything on fire if by chance that they would, because maybe they do go more than the 3 foot that you were keeping.
Okay.
And they start to catch something on fire. You've got something there for safety.
Sure.
And you don't have to scramble around and look for it.
What 2 things, so we kind of bring this to a close, what are 2 important tips that you can give our listeners and our viewers about fire pit safety? What are the 2 most important things we should walk away with?
Well, safety's paramount.
Okay.
Our first thing is we want you to keep people 3 foot away.
Okay.
That typically prevents any injuries. And the other thing is keep your fire 10 feet away from any structure.
Sure.
Especially your home. And that'll also help keep things safe.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. And remember, DPS is here to help you, our customer, succeed. It's important to know when you need a permit and when a permit is not necessary. If you have any questions about the permitting process, you can reach out to our customer service center, 311-MC311 at 240-777-0311. Or you can come into our office. We're at 2425 Reedy Drive on the 7th floor in Wheaton, Maryland. We're open Monday through Friday from 7:30 a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. And we always have folks here that can talk with you to answer your questions or to address any concern that you have. Thank you, Mr. Marcassani, for joining us on the podcast today. And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. Please check out the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services website at montgomerycountymd.gov/DPS. You can also find resources and information if you are in a commercial building, for instance, and you want more information about fire pits or fire safety. That information is available on our website. Got an idea for a topic, or do you have a question that you'd like to see addressed on our podcast? We'd like to hear from you. Please email your questions or your topic suggestions to dps.podcast@montgomerycountymd.gov. And if you found this podcast helpful, please share it with others and subscribe so you can always get our latest episodes. Until next time, I'm Gail Lucas. Remember, DPS is your project partner.